morning and welcome to Carleton TV for June 15th. Today I'm very proud to kick off a new series called Carleton at 60. Most of you may not know, but some of you do know, the club actually started in 1963, and so we're in our 60th year. So this series is going to be based on looking back at Carleton and looking at all the events, looking at major events and even some minor events that have happened here over the years, just to reminisce and also to get people to understand how we got here today. And today I'm speaking with one of the architects of this particular series, a series he proposed last year. He wanted to do vignettes. He called us to a meeting. We talked about it, and today we're going to start off with Stu's vision. Stu Wightman, who I have with me, one of our members, has been here for a few years, and it will be a regular contributor to this series. I'll be doing several interviews with several people, but Stu will be back several times. Today Stu's going to talk about the early days of Carleton, but before we get into that, I'm going to ask you a very important question. Stu, welcome to Carleton TV, and can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Well, I'm 83 years old. I've been a member at Carleton for 37 years, has been my wife. I went to school here in Ottawa to Lisgar Collegiate. I went to Carleton. My undergraduate degree is commerce, and I have multiple postgraduate degrees. In terms of employment, without sequencing them, I've been Director of Human Resources for M. Loeb Limited. They're people behind IGA. I've been an Assistant Dean of Men at Kemptville Agricultural College. I've worked for the Feds for 28 years as a park planner, a human resource planner, the Director of Strategic Planning for all government purposes. I left the public service at the Assistant Deputy Minister level as Secretary General and Chief Executive Officer of the CRTC. And I set up a consulting company with my wife, and for about better parts of 2 decades, we were one of the most active consulting firms in Ottawa, helping very large organizations change. And I think that's what set a bit of a template in my mind about how organizations do change. You know, there's an old saying, you shouldn't sweat the small stuff. Let me tell you, when you're changing an organization, you must sweat the small stuff. And you know, some of our clients were when the Coast Guard joined Fisheries and Oceans, you know, you're dealing with billions of capital costs or capital equipment in the ships. You're dealing with tens of thousands of people. It's quite a challenge. And I remember we had about a 6-month project where we combed over the 2 organizations for up and down. And when I finally met with the Commissioner of the Coast Guard and the Deputy Minister of Fisheries, and the Commissioner of the Coast Guard said, well, tell me, what's the number one concern that my people have? And I said to him, it's the color of your ships, the red and white, that you cannot mess with that. And I mean, he was taken aback, all the money he'd spent, and he felt that was rather trivial. But the reality is, it's been 25 or 30 years and they haven't changed the color of those ships, so somebody was listening.
So Stu, could you tell us how you got here to the golf course and your golfing kind of career, and how you ended up at Carleton?
Okay. I was, prior to being here, I was a member for 5 years at Highlands. I came to Highlands because they had expanded to 36 holes, and at that point it was only military, either serving or retired, and so they found they couldn't carry it, so they opened it up to the executives in the public service. So I joined, and after 5 years was totally frustrated because I was still working and I wasn't part of the military culture. I found it really hard to get a tea time, to get connected with anybody. There were all sorts of cliques, and you can understand that. I mean, these guys had served with each other for decades. So in frustration, I talked to a friend of mine who was a member at Carleton, guy by the name of John Fredette, who some of the older members might remember. He's now deceased. And he said, come to Carleton. And I came, and I was blown away. It was probably one of the two most significant moments in my golfing life. There were no cliques. Everyone was welcoming. It didn't matter what quality of golfer you were. They were open and receptive and supportive. And boy, it made a heck of a difference from Highlands. And thankfully, I still, when I talk to new members, hear the same thing. And that's hugely important. I think it's been a cornerstone of the culture of this organization, and with all the work that we've done in consulting about organizations, culture is hugely important. And maybe at some point in these conversations we can talk about that. But the Carleton culture is unique.
Right. Well, the culture had to start somewhere. We are going to discuss the very, very beginnings of the club later on, but what today we want to focus on is about 1967, 68, when the members decided that they were going to purchase the club. And can you tell us about that time? Because that's an amazing story.
Well, it is amazing, and again, it's what happened then and the way it happened. Is significant for the kind of club we are now. At that point, you could not be, and now we're talking at 67. In 67, the discussion had been going on since I guess 63, when this play started. That eventually the members would take over the responsibility for the management and ownership of the club. That was finalized in 67. The papers were signed in January of 68. There were some curious aspects. The first president, in the first meeting, and this would be back in 63, of the members, the first president said, look, this is going to be our course. We have got to take responsibility. We have to take ownership. We will be the owners. We will be making the key decisions. This is not to denigrate the professional staff, but it clearly set out the relationship that the members as owners would be the ultimate responsibility for the club. And that's the way it's been ever since. And so, and it was never written down other than the notes of his speech. But when Daphne and I came, that was clear that while it was unspoken, it was still expected, because we were, at that point, there were still many of the original members. You just watched them, you realized they got involved. You had to get on committees, you had to be on the board, you had to be active. Now, it wasn't, as I said, it wasn't written down and it wasn't compulsory, but it was certainly an important part of the culture. Mm. And so and up until that point, what may not, and members may not know, and by that point I mean 67 and 68, you could not be a member at this club unless you were a family member. You could not be an individual member. Everybody that was here was part of a family. And in 68, I think it was, it may have been 67, 68 I think, the board passed a resolution saying, this is after they took over, that you could be a single member, but you had to be married. And so the point I'm making here is that there were couples in part of the background of the culture of this organization. And when you go back to the very earliest days, when the pro shop, the first clubhouse was that little white house adjacent to the putting green. And there are stories about the women who would be either members or spouses of male members making sandwiches and selling them. This was our first kitchen. And so I think it would be a great idea if this club and the board contacted the current owners. I've given them a picture of the original course when his place was the only one that was evident, and if the board had a plaque prepared indicating that this is the first clubhouse, and it was like that until this one was built. They started in the following year.
Wow, that is truly, and then you had made the point that at some point, that it was a very social club. There were parties going on all the time. There were a lot of activities. There was a pool back here, and maybe we'll focus on that on another talk, because I know you want to talk about Ian McCurdy and his untimely passing, and Sheila McCurdy, and so maybe you can mention some.
Yeah, this is essentially a note. I don't know how many people are going to see this, but I'm sure a lot of the older members will remember Sheila. Sheila McCurdy was a longtime manager of the course, and did yeoman service over the years. And her husband Ian, I'm not sure whether he may have been a member at one time, but he wasn't. I think he was probably here more as a guest of his wife, but he had a senior position in the local police, the Ontario Provincial Police detachment here. And back in the day, Men's League was quite an event here. We would go through until midnight playing bridge, playing poker, and of course drinking. And so whenever there was a ride program or any kind of a stop out on the main road, the word would come down from Ian McCurdy, you boys better be going out the back way. And so that's where we went. And I think as long as Ian McCurdy was there, nobody ever got pulled over. So, and Ian passed away, of course, just recently. So it's, I'm sure a lot of our hearts go out to Sheila and what she's going through.
And I hope to have Sheila on at a later time, because her story is also amazing, some of the things they went through in those early days. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to add for this particular segment? Because I know we're going to have you back. So.
Yeah, okay. I guess I would, a couple of things. One, a lot of the new members would not appreciate this. I went to the orientation session that our two pros gave for new members, and it was very good. It was all about the practicalities of getting engaged and being part of the leagues, and a little bit about themselves, which was good. I wasn't there for the entire session, but what was missing, and I can understand why it would be, is this reference to ownership, and how what is first and foremost about being a member here is the fact that you're an owner. And it became clear to me back 22 years ago when I was made the captain, and that year we got 62 full golfers from Cedar Hill. And they came, and one of my biggest challenges as captain was to get them integrated to the club and appreciating that sense of responsibility inherent in being an owner. And it came to sort of focus when I overheard two of the women that had come from Cedar Hill commenting at the end of the year about whether they were going to go to the annual meeting. And one of them said, well, you know, I mean, I'm not, there's nothing on the agenda that really attracts me. And what was gratifying was the other woman said, look, we don't have to deal with the Shirelles anymore. We own this place. We have to go. It's our responsibility. And I mean, when you see that expressed in such definite terms, and you see how it's impacted, and maybe some at one of these sessions we'll talk about the role of the owners when this place burned down and what happened when the rebuild happened. Absolutely. It was a phenomenal moment. I think the high point of this club's existence.
Yeah, and that certainly is going to be on the agenda. Stu, thank you very, very much. Thank you for suggesting this series, and thanks for opening off. And we will talk to you later, probably next month, on another topic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.